Hi everyone, welcome to episode 12 of Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. And today I'm joined with Phil, which means you've got the original dynamic duo back on Demand Decoded, which is great. We haven't done one for a while together, so it's good to be back. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about how you can unlock the untapped potential of your current website. And Phil, I think this is right in your sweet spot, isn't it? So you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, I am, Dan. Thanks. This is in my sweet spot, and I think it's an area where lots of businesses have a huge opportunity still in front of them. And it's not, as we discussed earlier, it's not about the incremental changes, that come from A/B tests on button color, which are so hard to do conclusively in B2B anyway. It's about fundamental UX best practice that can really step change results through being buyer-centric. And I observe that I think marketers in the process of developing these new websites for their businesses, getting caught up in things and forgetting to a degree who the website's for. And what's important, therefore, as a result, as a website is a tool for a buyer to use to make a decision. And when you keep that truth at the center of things, you make decisions that are somewhat different, perhaps, from the decisions we commonly see being made that satisfy the stakeholders internally or, please us, but can be quite detrimental to the results that we get, and the buyer experience. So, yes, it is really interesting to me and really, really do like helping people improve this area of their marketing.
Amazing. Yeah, hopefully this episode is going to be absolutely packed with really actionable tips that, can fundamentally change the success of your website without overhauling it completely. So yeah, really excited for this one. Right, so let's dive in. If you're watching live, by the way, and you haven't been here before, we, answer questions live. So if you pop them in the chat on LinkedIn, we can bring them up as we go along. So pop them in there if you have any. Cool. So I think just to start us off, it would be really important to stress the actual importance of an effective website, particularly in B2B. So do you want to just talk a bit about that, Phil?
It will come as no surprise to many listening that, all roads lead to the website ultimately. The vast majority of what we do within digital marketing, has the objective of getting people to come to our website and express their interest in some way or another. A website can and should be an incredibly powerful way to generate high quality inquiries, for what you offer from among your ideal customer, but in so many cases is not, and the reason for that is in part what we've just talked about, which is confusion around who the website is for and therefore what's most important about the experience we create. And so there are ways to move the website back into the direction of being this really, really strong creator of quality inquiries and opportunities. And websites still, this is not new, still influence a huge proportion of the ultimate deals that we do, the ultimate revenue that we generate, whether they confirm the ideas and the beliefs that a buyer has about you before they buy, or whether it's the place they discover you and so on. They're at the center of so many purchases. It's really important to do whatever you can to make them work effectively within this critical area of your marketing, which is helping you to be discovered, helping you to turn interest into opportunity, helping you to bring buyers on the journey and get them into your sales process or your pipeline or your product.
Yeah, nice. And I think you just touched on it there in terms of the elements that you actually need to bring together to unlock that potential of your website. But just to clarify, can you just, cover what those elements are that you need?
Yeah, so the website is, this critical point on the customer journey where they can voluntarily express their interest, but it plays a role across more of the process, more of the journey that they go on. And so, we liken this to the original inbound philosophy, the attract, engage, convert model actually applies quite well to the role of your website within your marketing, which is it has to support your being found, by your buyer. So attracting the buyer and attracting traffic at times, but also being on the receiving end of it if it's generated other sources. So while you might not be putting links into social for reasons of algorithm, preference, you will still be generating traffic to your website from the content that you put there. So attract and or receive the traffic, the visitor, engage them, capture their attention, confirm for them they're in the right place, keep them on your site beyond that blink test that happens at the very beginning of their visit, the first 8 seconds, and take them on a journey through the content that keeps them exploring and going and finding the information they need. And then conversion, making it possible and increasing the likelihood that the people that are on your site will take the last step, will convert, will raise their hand. And we mean convert at the bottom of the funnel, into a high intent lead or an MQL in our nomenclature, ready to talk sales, ready to enter the pipeline, serious about buying. So it's got to do attract, it's got to engage, and it's got to convert.
Yeah, and hopefully within this episode, you probably will provide some, proven tips on how to do all of those things more effectively, and probably stop doing certain things that are hampering your performance in those areas.
Yeah.
So I suppose let's dive into the meaty part of this episode and actually run through some of our proven tips for improving that first stage on the journey, in the inbound philosophy, which is attract. So yeah, have you got any top proven tips for improving website discoverability?
So there's the 3 elements to it that we, defined earlier, which is that there's SEO, which plays a huge role. There's the content that you create, and then there's the performance of that website. These are the 3 things that can have, a profound or pronounced impact on how discoverable you are and how much traffic you attract and or receive. So starting with SEO, it's a thread that runs through everything, more or less. It runs from the meta title on every page, through its content, through the links to it, and through the other pieces of resources, articles, and content that are on the subject. It's not one thing; it's everything to a certain degree. And so when it comes to SEO, I think it's important to really think clearly about where the different types of content that are on your website fit into the buyer journey, into the purchase process. And, let that guide your thinking about how much you invest in its presentation, how you lay it out, how you structure it, design it, and organize it, and so on. In the context of SEO, that means, using articles, blog articles, for example, to target long tail queries that your buyers are using as part of the research process. Blog articles still very, very effective at being found by buyers who are asking Google and Bing their questions. So articles aimed at long tail queries, will help you to increase your SEO footprint in a way, get more buyers onto your site around the context of their problems and the diagnosis that they're going through. So that's important. But the role of that content is not only to get those people in at that stage, is to support your discoverability for shorter, more competitive, commercial, and to some degree informational keywords. So the things that buyers use when they're further along the purchase process. And this is key, so you need your website pages, your services, your products, your solutions to be found when buyers enter commercial keywords into search engines. And the better you are found, the higher up you are, the more quality traffic you're going to receive and the more opportunities you're going to have to create pipeline from those visitors. And the number one way to do that, before you tackle anything else, is internal linking. And so, one thing that I encourage a lot of people to do is think about the keywords that describe in buyer language their offering, their solution, which are ultimately the keywords they want to be found for, and see how well they've internally linked around that term. So go to Google, type in site : your domain, and then the keyword that you need to be found for, and Google will return all the pages on your site that feature that keyword, most of which will probably be blog articles. Now check how frequently, how consistently you match exactly that keyword in those articles, if at all, to those commercial pages and those informational pages that are expected to rank for it. And in most cases, it's a huge opportunity. There's next to no exact match internal linking for the keywords that we want buyers to find us for. And if you go through and you implement that, and if you've got a large backlog of content on which to do it, even more important and even better, you can really impact where you're found in the search results for those really vitally important commercial keywords. So exact match internal linking, which Google and other SEO tools can tell you exactly where your opportunities to do it are the first thing to take care of before you move on to other more nuanced versions of internal linking and SEO, such as linking between your blog posts and linking semantically to your keywords. Get that basic in place, and many times you'll be really surprised and impressed with the result that you get.
Yeah, I know, like when you've kind of given me advice to introduce more exact match internal links. We've had huge success on pillar pages, for example, and it's quite incredible actually, like the power of internal linking. I know I didn't realize it at the time, and it's quite amazing how you can almost kind of manipulate how your pages rank in Google for the kind of keywords and stuff. Like, we've done some positioning changing on our website, which means, ultimately changing entire pages worth of content. But, by simply using internal linking, exact match to point to those pages, you can then just rank for a completely different keyword.
Exactly. There's two things that I find interesting about this. One is it's a really fundamental tactic that for some reason gets sort of skipped over a lot of the time. It's just not well articulated in a lot of the SEO advice that's available online, the SEO training, and people sort of leap to those more complicated, more nuanced versions of SEO, semantic linking and so on, or they quickly assume that it will immediately become, spammy. And they'll be penalized for it. But, I've got news for you. Most of us are operating so far below the level at which our internal linking becomes spammy that we've got nothing to worry about. And, if you've got a keyword that's commercial and you're ranking mediocre for it today, and you find these opportunities, do it. You might quite quickly see the positive result in terms of your position. And then, now there was another thing that I was thinking was interesting. Oh yeah, so the two aspects are it's skipped over in favor of more complicated things, and or people fear that it will negatively impact them when anything but in most cases. You've got a lot of runway before that becomes an issue. Within that, it is still important that the pages that you're linking to have the keywords that you want to be found for in their content, specifically within their H1 titles, their meta titles, ideally within meta descriptions. Now, that to some can be a challenging thing to accept, because they might feel that it means they can't be creative or they can't convey their brand personality or something. But there's no getting away from the fact that these things are still, vitally important ranking signals in themselves, and search engines are still a vitally important way to be discovered and capture demand. And you can't get away from the fact that having those keywords in those places optimizes the result you get from SEO.
Yeah. It seems so simple, doesn't it, to even be talking about that now, because it is kind of like SEO 101. Put the keyword in your metadata and H1 and URL. But it's amazing how many businesses don't do it. And it's like, if you want to be found for that keyword with that page, sorry, but you have to put it in these places.
Yeah. No. So ultimately, quality web copy will combine unique brand with those keywords that buyers use. And, talking in the buyer's language is always more effective at getting them into your world than, trying to convince them on some new version of, some new buzzword or way of describing their problem. Many businesses have encountered this problem, and when they adopt buyer language and they adopt buyer keywords, that they're going to start to see the results that they're looking for. And yeah, there's nothing that, you or I or anyone can do that's going to change that anytime soon. There are some ways to sort of, tinker with styling so that, something on your page visually looks like it's got priority over the actual H1 title. That's fine, I think, for the most part. I haven't heard that that's negative in its impact. But, don't let brand and personal preference get in the way of communicating clearly using buyer language, aka keywords. And then the other thing that you made me think was this thing about internal linking and its sort of overlooked power. You can have a real big impact on your own results just by implementing consistent internal linking or optimizing what you've done it previously, but there's room to improve it. And for the most part, I prefer that over trying to get backlinks in, for example. So for a long time people were like, well, a backlink is worth so much more SEO use than anything else, that surely that has to be where my focus is. And I'm like, well, you can go after those opportunities, but we all know how hard they are to realize. It's a mass market now, where every opportunity is being tapped, repeatedly. So in the time that it might take you to, generate, if you're lucky, one quality backlink, you can create 100 or 1,000 quality internal links, which I've seen time and time again have an immediate and significant impact on position. So why would you do it?
And that's just made me think, actually, I don't know if you'd agree with this, in that time it takes you to get that one quality backlink. Think of all the great content that you could create combined with internal links, rank highly, and just get backlinks organically from ranking well.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, that is the true intent behind the value of backlinking. They're freely given. But of course, marketers like to try and game every opportunity that exists, and so it became a strategy in itself. But I think that if you're creating quality content, you're linking it correctly, frankly, in my opinion, and then distributing it as well. Then you've got everything you need to grow your pipeline, through your website ultimately. Well, not
cool.
But you've got the foundations in place. The last of the trio was performance within discoverability. Website performance is a factor. Website security is a factor. The technology underneath your website is therefore a factor. But I think it's worth mentioning that the requirements for these things are the same for everybody. So any effort you spend configuring servers, setting up SSL, plugging in content delivery network, maintaining, securing, patching your CMS is doing nothing to differentiate you from any competitor. We're all aiming for the same in that regard. So when it comes to choosing platforms and choosing CMSs, I'm in favor of choosing, ones that take care of those table stakes for you and let you focus your energy, resources, and money on what differentiates you, what's unique about your business, which is the user experience, content, and brand on your website.
Yeah, I've heard you make that point before, and it really just resonates. The amount of businesses still piling money into, server configuration and maintenance when all it's doing is just putting them on a level playing field with somebody using an off-the-shelf CMS. It's pretty crazy.
Exactly. I mean, I think there's lots of good choices for CMS for B2Bs now, and they're worth looking at. And I think when things like security and performance, reliability, availability, when they become hygiene factors, table stakes, that's the time to outsource it to someone who's much better placed to deliver it at the right quality, cost efficiently, rather than retain your own in-house capability to do it. I think that's the sort of principle at play there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So the real differentiator and thing that's going to help you here is, that user experience, that engagement that you receive from your website when somebody lands there. So have you got any top proven tips for that next stage along?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from the previous point, performance plays a role here too, as in the speed at which your pages load wherever your visitor is in the world, is a factor. But again, it's not a factor that I think you, the B2B marketer, should be concerning yourself with. Outsource that to someone who knows better how to do it. Focus your energy on the user experience that you create on top of that platform. And the number one place where people can often have a big impact quickly is their messaging. And again, this is rooted in that sort of getting caught up in the process and forgetting who the website user is to a certain degree, and letting that affect the language that makes it onto your page, your site, in critical places. None more critical than the homepage hero section. Your homepage, your hero, needs to say what you do, who you do it for, and what problem you solve somehow very quickly, to ensure that buyers who've arrived stay. Stay beyond the blink test, stay beyond the first 8 seconds. And overly clever, obfuscated value proposition statements that don't say anything clearly are detrimental to that experience. So clear beats clever in 100% of cases. A bona fide expert on this is Pep Layar at Winter. He calls it crisp positioning, and I really like that. He says you've got to get across those three key things: exactly what you do and who you do it for and what problem you solve. Otherwise, people arriving on your website are going to be none the wiser as to why you're a viable choice compared to any other alternative, what's different about your solution, and you're not doing yourself any favors. So that's the number one area. Ultimately, while design and user experience and other things are important, without the written word, nothing would happen at all.
Yeah, and that message at the top of your homepage not only has to appeal to those first-time users on your site that have found you through search, it also has to, verify that people that have heard of you elsewhere are in the right place once they found you. So just make it clear, simple, and easy to understand.
It's got to, your website content in general has got to work for visitors wherever they're coming from and at whatever stage of the buying process they're at. And nevertheless, the reality is that for most businesses, the majority of their website visitors are going to be first-time visitors. And so it really is important to consider the first-time visitors' experience and what they take away from you, above anything else. And so that often is a justification for not featuring news sliders in the first, above the fold of your page. So sliders themselves, where you have 3 or 4 value propositions whizzing by, those have got to go. Simply, those are just bad news. That they will negatively impact your SEO, your performance, and that buyer experience when they arrive on your site, because the motion of those things, Nielsen Norman did great research into the effect of sliders on the human brain, and it's the motion overrides everything else. When things move, our eyes and our brain latch onto that movement at the expense of everything else, especially the written word. And so if you've got an important message that's sliding by, people are going to be staring at it, but not consuming it and not retaining it later. So that's really good reason not to have sliders. Similar issue with like rotating text that's sometimes become an alternative. It can work, I think, but use caution, because if you're using it just to dilute your message effectively to say we do everything for everyone, it's going to have a negative effect on the user experience as opposed to a positive one. But even beyond that, putting content into the homepage, into the hero, that's sort of aimed at somebody who's coming to your website every day, it is probably not going to have a great impact, because most people aren't coming to your website every day. to see what new thing you've added to that ticker.
Almost definitely. Yeah.
Clear messaging, static, presented statically, that's aimed at the first time visitor is the most reliable way to get your website working better for you.
Yeah. And like, I know, you've heard it before where people have said, oh, well, it's not different then, is it? Like we want to be different. We want to show it in an animated way and have this slider and have something non-conventional that's outside of the box. But there's a reason it's conventional.
Yeah.
It works.
There's not a lot to be gained by trying to use your website. If B2B pipeline is your objective, there's not a lot to be gained by trying to use your website to buck certain trends and certain conventions. Horizontal navigation, static hero sections, clear copy, clear positioning, clear messaging, anything that gets the user to ask themselves, how do I use or interact or navigate with this site? It's likely going to send them away because they haven't got time to figure that out. They're trying to solve their problems as quickly as possible. So there are conventions that are best followed for that reason. Your brand and how you communicate visually and with the written word, that's where you get to be unique, of course, and that's where you need to use language to differentiate yourself, and you need to communicate your value proposition clearly but smartly, so that's where the uniqueness comes in, not in the user interface ultimately.
Yeah. So when somebody then, they've landed on your website, they've confirmed that the message is what they think. In terms of that layout of content, are there any kind of tips on what you should be doing there?
In general, keeping it simple is usually more effective than overcomplicating it, right? You need to focus attention on what matters. So layouts that are restrained and, allow buyers and visitors to your website to consume with ease perform better than ones that are overly complicated and overly, moving or changing or shifting. So animation is a great asset and can be used to good effect to augment the user experience, but it can just as easily get in the way of it and distract again, because motion, we've talked about how much motion distracts the mind from reading, so therefore you've got to use it with caution to support the user experience. So focus the attention on what matters, which for the most part is going to be the written word, which means clear, concise copy that's scannable, snackable, digestible, headers that make sense and like follow on from that hero point we made about being clear and honest about what you offer and who you're for, and letting things breathe. Ultimately, give them space to breathe for the most part.
Yeah, cool. Then obviously, one of the most important parts of your website, the navigation. Tips on that people can, just take away today.
Yeah, it's it's an important factor that both deservedly and sometimes for the wrong reasons gets a lot of attention. It's one of the areas where sometimes people fall into the trap of let's be unique, let's do it differently, but that's typically a bad thing. The key things to make sure your website performs better are to design navigation that's device and display appropriate first and foremost. So burger menus are a necessary compromise on mobile screen because there's only space for that approach. They are not a good design choice on desktop, because they simply hide key content from the buyer and make it ask more of them to engage with your site and navigate it. Open the burger, click something, it closes again. It's all gone. Click it again, open it, remind yourself what was there, etc. This is all effort visitors and buyers don't want to put in to deciding whether to buy from you or not, right? So it's friction. That's adding friction to the experience. Using the right device pattern for the screen that the visitor is using is, tip number one. I suppose.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is the mega menu thing. So it's not unusual that websites grow and the number of pages that exist and the number of services, solutions, and products that are offered, don't lend themselves to simple or drop-down navigations anymore. There's too much. So we go to mega menus, and mega menus are good to a point, but then they can go past that point and they start becoming very detrimental to the user experience. And that's when they contain a ton of options, a plethora of options. And even worse, those options are not signposted and styled to make them understandable to the visitor. So you go to a website, you click on a menu item, and a panel opens, and it's just chock-a-block with identical looking links to 20, 30, 40 in some cases pages. It induces in some choice paralysis, right? They'd rather flee the scene and go somewhere else than decide which of those pages to pick based on the very little information that they have in most cases about what's on the other side of that click. So by all means, use mega menus. By all means, present more content than you can within a simple drop-down menu. But make choices on behalf of your buyer, behalf of your visitor, about what they need to see next and what they should see next, and include those things on your navigation. Don't go all out with every single link and every single page you have, no matter how tempting that might be, because it will decrease the engagement. It will decrease the duration of the visit for on average, as buyers will just think, oh, enough, I'm going elsewhere. Within the design of mega menus, it's a broader topic, that it's important to segment the content, to style things carefully so that people can read and scan and identify what's what. It can be useful to use imagery, illustration, or icon to support certain aspects of mega menus, but it's a case-by-case situation. There's no hard and fast rules, I think, that apply universally there, other than less is more, probably. And then the final thing to ensure is it's not so much of a big issue nowadays, but you still see it sometimes, which is the diagonal problem, as again Nielsen Norman coined the term diagonal problem, I think, which is if you've got a mega menu, it's important to test it as your buyer would use it, which is when they move directly from the thing that opened it, the menu option at the top, to the sub page over here on the left or over here on the right. If the mega menu closes as they make that movement and they've got to go back and reset, it's infuriating.
Yeah, we've all been there, trying to get that mouse movement absolutely perfect so the navigation stays open, but you take the perfect line that keeps it.
Yeah, I mean,
just get it right.
It only happens occasionally, but when it does, it's so infuriating. Exasperated by the time you get to the page that you were headed to. So, yeah, test the UX from that perspective. Make choices for your buyer. Don't show them everything. Show them what's most important, and constrain that navigation crucially, so as not to induce choice paralysis.
Yeah, cool. Obviously, mobile first has been a thing for a while. So, any tips particularly for mobile?
The only one that I think is worth mentioning here is, so within a mobile, you've obviously got very limited space, hence the invention of and the necessity of the burger menu navigation. However, that pattern tends to lead us to putting all navigation items inside the burger behind that click on mobile. And most headers, most navigation bars, particularly for B2B SaaS companies, has a key CTA button, book a demo, book a trial, or talk to sales or something. It can be positive. It can have a positive impact to move that CTA outside of the menu on mobile so that it's present alongside the burger navigation. Because again, think about what we're trying to encourage. We're trying to encourage buyers to voluntarily, easily convert into pipeline or something close to it, and that CTA is one of the key ways that they will probably do it. So if it's hidden 90% or 95% of the time they're on your website on mobile, what's the chance that they're going to see it, click it, take that step? Whereas putting it right up there alongside your burger navigation, space permitting, can have a positive impact on mobile high intent lead generation.
Yeah, you talk about friction a lot. It just removes that one click of friction, doesn't it? And probably scrolling all the way to the bottom then of that navigation to find it, which is important to mention as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the mobile navigation is an incredibly hard conundrum, and there is no great, perfect solution because, like you say, quite often, it will run longer than the screen, and things will be hidden off the bottom. So yeah, it's a good idea to move that up and out and test if that has the positive impact that we've seen it have.
Yeah, cool. Right, so good UX engagement tips there. So let's say somebody's got that all sorted now. Discoverability is good. They're attracting the right people. When somebody's coming to the site, they're finding the right content well. They're engaging with the website. They can navigate it easily. So in terms of conversion, what are some proven tips that we can give in terms of improving conversion in our sense, which is high intent conversions, people actually asking to talk to you?
Yeah. Conversion in that sense tends to come down to two, key types of UX pattern and proposition, which is the CTA offer, the specific structured bottom of the funnel offer that we put forward, and the general contact us page that most websites have. So we'll talk about those two things separately. When it comes to CTAs, the most important thing is to present a CTA, an offer, in logical places. So, homepage, navigation bar is good in the most part for the CTA. That's logical and mutually beneficial, and to be honest about it, which is to say that in order for a CTA to be effective and for the conversions that it generates to be quality and to convert into pipeline, I think it's important that both buyer and business get value from it. And that principle should define, what you offer, what you ask for in return, and how you let people engage with it. So, take the very, very common, demo offer. It's a classic bottom of the funnel CTA, and it's a perfectly good one. But it exists in a hierarchy with other CTAs, which are more or less attractive to buyers, depending to some degree on the sector and the circumstances. Yeah. But I think it largely holds true that, demo will be more attractive than a conversation with sales, and trial will be more attractive than demo, which is more attractive than, conversation with sales.
Yeah.
But the temptation is always to dress the thing on offer up as the better version because it will be more attractive to buyers. And if we say that we've got a trial available, but the page we take them to, is actually offering them a demo or worse, a conversation with sales, we marketers sometimes try to convince ourselves that we can navigate that sort of bait and switch experience by explaining it will be a high quality conversation with sales, or it will be a tailored demo, whatever. We think we can address the mismatch there, but the harm is done. The damage is done to the trust and to the attractiveness. So it always works better to present the offer you have honestly. Call a demo and call a trial, and don't dress it up as something else. And I think by doing that, by being clear and upfront and honest about what it is, you ensure that it contains that structure that creates that mutual benefit. So, for example, before we talk about contact us pages, think about the contact us CTA. If you haven't got a trial and you haven't got a demo, then you've probably got to offer a conversation.
Yeah.
But truth be told, the conversation you want to have with someone is about them purchasing. It's not a conversation about anything else. So I think be clear and upfront about it and use language like talk to sales to create structure and honesty around what's on offer, to create mutual benefit so that buyers who click that button know what they're going to get. They know why they're doing that action. And you also, know that anyone that completes that process is likely to be of a higher quality with higher intent and more serious. Whereas if it's a contact us CTA linking to a contact us page, you've got two issues. One is there's no structure there. There's no mutual give and get. It's just completely open-ended, as in they can contact you about anything, and they do. Contact us pages are, in many cases, generators of more spam than they are quality business inquiries, and in part due to the message that offer has in its CTA and its meaning.
Yeah, I love talk to sales because I just think it's so direct and honest. You really can't get better than it. You're not trying to dress anything up. It is what it is. And I think that one of the problems that us marketers have is trying to look at every single metric and improve that across the board. But truth is, if you do change that CTA in your navigation from something wishy-washy to try and dress up a conversation, if you change it to talk to sales, you probably will see less clicks on that button. You probably will see a drop off potentially in traffic to that page. But actually, the inquiries that you get on that page will, like you said, Phil, be high quality because somebody knows exactly what they're getting themselves in for.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, lots of businesses will still want to have a contact us mechanism on their site, right? I'm familiar with that desire. But in my experience, the contact us page is so unconducive to buyers expressing their interest. It doesn't really stand up under scrutiny. The majority of people that get in touch with you through a contact us form on a contact us page are anything but buyers. It's, offers for this, that, and the other, and people pitching and, that sort of thing. What we've seen work rather well in some cases is actually drop that page altogether, but have that contact us form in your website footer. Now, we've seen that increase both the quantity and quality of contact us conversions on a number of sites. And I would argue that that's better use of that valuable real estate than, for example, a blog subscription form, because let's face it, nobody's coming to your website to subscribe to your blog, for the most part. So that form is a waste of real estate there, whereas contact us, which appears on every page and can be used in the context of that page, has proven itself to be fairly attractive to B2B buyers in a number of situations. So
I'll be in one.
Yeah. I mean, these things are nearly always tested successfully on ourselves first. But yeah, I think because you're not asking someone to click a button to go to a page where they've then got to explain themselves to you in order to start a conversation. You're sort of removing the friction in a positive way while retaining the structure, and it's more conducive to quality conversions, and it tends to decrease the spam a little bit, although it still comes through. But ultimately, contact us pages that I've seen the data for are usually not good generators of high intent leads, and they're one of the reasons, if that's where visitors are being channeled to, it can be one of the reasons why a website isn't generating high intent leads, historically, because many situations clients come to us and the sort of the amount of opportunities or pipeline that comes through their website in a measurable way is really, really low, if not zero. And I think that's one of the factors.
Where do you stand on form, whilst we're on the topic of forms, form fields and the number of form fields? Because it's usually, a point that comes up when you're talking about conversion rates and stuff like that. Oh, you've got too many form fields in there. Buyers don't want to submit that length of form, or they don't want to give away that bit of information. Where do you stand on the length, the kind, and the types of fields that you should have on a form?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably common sense is the most important thing to trust here. We've seen that buyers will fill in form fields. They will fill in longer fields to get in touch with you. If your solution addresses a problem they have, they will fill in multiple form fields to get in touch with you. So it's not necessary to strip that right back down to the bare minimum simply to increase the conversion rate. It's not as cut and dry as that in B2B. Can you go too long? Of course, no one's going to populate, 50 fields just to trigger a conversation with you. But I wouldn't get hung up on minimizing the form length if you're gathering valuable data through that form that improves the buyer experience as well. So, for example, when we talk about self-reported attribution, one of the objections that comes up is, well, it's an additional form field that will reduce the conversion rate. Probably it won't.
It doesn't. Yeah, I think Refine Labs actually published a study in their vault, which basically proved it doesn't. In fact, I think in most cases it improved it.
Right, interesting. Yeah, because B2B buyers are interesting, characters that, much like us, right? They appreciate structure, which is why I think you can go too far removing friction if it takes away all structure and all mutual benefit, which is why, diary embeds that let people book time directly in your AE's diary, and some applications of chatbots can be counterproductive either in that buyers won't engage with them at a terribly high rate and therefore they don't have the desired impact, or counterproductive in that they reduce the quality of the conversion so much that you're now wasting your time again on loads of poor quality, poor fit leads. But adding a few fields to your conversion forms most likely isn't going to dramatically impact positively or negatively your conversion rate. And as you said, more fields can actually have a positive impact. I do tend to advise that people don't collect information that's readily available elsewhere. So, for example, it's really good to collect information that's unique about the visitor in the form field that helps you segment, for example, and either assign them or make sure that their conversation thereafter is effective and structured. You probably don't need to, for example, get their phone number or other demographic information, because that can be collected so easily. Firmographic, demographic data just comes into your CRM these days, from other systems. So don't ask them for headcount or turnover size or whatever, unless it's important to give them the experience that they need. But you can. A lot of forms are long because they're collecting information that can be gathered easily elsewhere, and that's just a waste of time, really, for everyone.
Yeah, on that point of friction that you just made, I know we've spoken about it before, but some friction will actually improve your conversions. Not less friction isn't always better. Like actually, adding more form fields is sometimes a better thing, because then people that are submitting it are more probably advanced in their buyer journey and actually really want to have that conversation with you. So probably, a better bit higher intent prospect that you can actually work with, rather than just opening everything up to any old person to waste time with you, basically.
Yeah, which I think is partly the sort of older lead gen mentality. Any lead being seen as a good thing because it's volume into the SDR function that produces the output. But people are waking up to the fact that now that just how much time and money is being spent generating and following up, not just poor fit leads, leads that are just not going to go anywhere, anytime soon. So a lot of the techniques and technologies that sort of surged in popularity a little while ago were really about maximizing lead volume. By I think removing qualification and lead quality from the mix. And I think that that's a case where the effort to remove friction goes too far and removes structure or removes mutual benefit. This is a business exchange at the end of the day, and it needs to be mutually beneficial for it to go anywhere. And if all the benefit is on the the lead side and none of the benefit is on the business side, then it's not going to go forward.
Yeah, and so I think the next point from that is, obviously we're talking about unlocking the untapped potential of your website, and that goes beyond your website actually, because the potential of your website impacts your entire business all the way through to when somebody becomes a customer and beyond that probably. But, you know, after somebody submits that form, doesn't matter how many fields are on there, after they submit it, there's a few things, a few good practices that you can put in place there. Like when they submit, make sure they know what's going to happen next. Are they going to get an email? You know, is it going to take them to, do they need to click to another page to then, you know, enter their details and, you know, book a call with sales, or will they get an automated email? When that next action happens, make sure it happens fast. You know, like speed is your friend in this situation. I think Harvard Business Review did a study which basically said when contacts receive an email back after submitting an inquiry, they're 7 times more likely to actually have a meaningful conversation with you. So speed is your best friend there. So, you know, introduce things like automated follow-up emails. You know, you can even say in those automated follow-up emails that it is automated, but just make it quick because ultimately that's better than waiting 24 hours for somebody to get in touch. And then when that person, probably sales, finally comes to talk to that person, make sure they have all of the information they need to have a meaningful conversation with that person.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I've seen you implement that for us and the positive impact it's had, and for clients too. So I agree with that. I think it's worth saying that if you do all of the things that we've just discussed, you are making your website a better place for buyers to positively choose you. You know, the exchange of information between you and them does not happen in a vacuum. You know, they are probably visiting other sites that offer similar things. They've been researching this for some time. You know, there's a lot of context around the experience. But if you make it a better place for them to come, understand, develop preference and trust by implementing these rather simple tips that we've outlined today, you will see an improved performance from your website. You will see more buyers, you know, coming to you with their intent to buy as a result. You know, and it isn't rocket science to start getting those improvements going through. You've just got to put the buyer at the center of the website decision making again. You know, get out of your own way a bit, and optimize for their experience.
Yeah, and optimize for the right thing, which is, you know, those buyers that are raising their hand, submitting a form probably to say, I would like to talk to you about what you do. You're not optimizing for low intent leads that are probably never going to convert. It doesn't really matter, and you're probably wasting your time doing that. So
yeah, indeed. Perhaps the most important marketing metric of them all is conversion rate from website visitor to high intent lead. You know, now we call that MQL, but I know that not everybody listening will. You could call it SQL or SAL or something of your own creating, but how effective your website is at turning interest into opportunity, turning visitor into high intent lead, is the most illuminating metric you have available, and will help you understand, you know, and if you can increase it, you know, will help you grow your pipeline faster. It will grow the pipeline, it will increase sales velocity, it will reduce churn, you know, it will improve the quality of conversations, you know, across the board. So that's the most important thing to measure, and it's the most important metric, you know, of many.
Yeah, and if you do measure that and then implement some of the tips that we've shared today, you know, you should see that increase in high intent leads just by making, you know, these small tweaks that can have such a massive impact.
Definitely.
Cool. Right. Well, let's wrap it up there, seeing as we're almost at the hour. That was great. Thanks for that, Phil. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. And you can take away some of these tips that we shared to really untap the potential of your website and just extract more from what you've had quite easily. So be sure to follow the Blend LinkedIn page to join any future live events, or just stay updated with our content and stuff. And of course, you can watch or listen to any of the previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically anywhere. Just search for Demand Decoded. Cool. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.